You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, we have with us someone who's been on the program several times. I'm referring to Alan Abramson, well-known attorney, criminal defense attorney, which means don't leave your house without his card. And he's with the firm of Abramson and Morak. Alan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Reverend. Good morning, Rabbi.
Okay. So we've been talking offline about free speech, and people freely speak about it, but I think may not recognize what it means and what it doesn't mean. So hopefully we can have a real informative discussion as to free speech. What's the source of it?
The source of free speech is the First Amendment. And the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or press or the right of people to peaceably assemble. And the states are bound by that after the passage of the 14th Amendment. But understand that private entities are not bound by the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects against government action, state and federal, not the actions of private groups or individuals. And as I always say to you, Rabbi and Reverend, it's complicated. There are no easy, absolute answers.
Yeah, what you said there is very, very important because in the United States, we have the First Amendment and it protects individuals from government censorship or punishment for speech. But it doesn't guarantee that private actors like television networks, platforms, or employers, that they have to tolerate all speech. And that's an important distinction because we have recently the whole Jimmy Kimmel affair where, government was pressuring a network to censor or to suspend an individual entertainer for his speech. How do we understand that?
Well, it's interesting. If ABC wanted to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air because they didn't like his show, or was getting bad ratings, or, again, they just didn't like something he said, they can do it. The problem here is that the chairman of the FCC got involved, and he said, we'll take care of it one way or the other. And that really put pressure on ABC and the affiliates. And then when you add on to that, the President of the United States weighing in, that is what the First Amendment is supposed to protect against, government interference with private speech.
So when we talk about government interference, there are limitations on free speech where government can interfere according to certain court decisions, correct?
Yes. There are situations like that. But understand, the First Amendment, it's an extraordinary thing that very few countries have, if any countries. But you have to be prepared for what the First Amendment protects. But let's start. First Amendment doesn't protect things like child pornography, defamation, obscenity, fraudulent speech. In other words, speech that's designed to, cheat people. Fighting words is one that people talk about often. So there are exemptions. But, for example, when the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, an extraordinarily provocative act and a horrible message, in my opinion, the government was bound not only to allow them to march, but to protect them while they were marching. And there was tremendous police presence there, and that's what the First Amendment requires.
And a very painful moment. I mean, certainly for all of us, Holocaust survivors and those who had experienced the horrors of that period, to hear that language being pronounced in public and to see police protecting those individuals was heartbreaking, was horrifying.
Yes.
But as you say, that's the price you pay for living in democracy. What's the alternative?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is always we need more speech then. We need people to come out and protest the Nazi march. We need people to speak out forcibly against their message. But the First Amendment does protect even the most vile speech unless it transforms into one of those other exceptions.
So broadcasters are particularly regulated by the FCC. That's why Carr, chairman, got involved in this. But the television environment is different than the internet because the regulation is not there yet for the internet. Correct?
That's correct. That is correct. The internet is wide open. Now, having said that, you can't have a website that has child pornography. You can't, you can defame someone over the internet, but there are very few regulations. And yes, the FCC does regulate television, but they can prohibit you from saying certain words on television, things like that, but they can't regulate the message.
So what is it that Kimmel said in their view that was so offensive, that got people so excited in a negative way?
That's a great question. And I think you have to start by understanding what Jimmy Kimmel said first, immediately after Charlie Kirk's murder. He said, instead of angry finger-pointing, can we just one day agree that it is horrible and monstrous to shoot another human being? On behalf of my family, we send love to the Kirks and to all the children, parents, and innocents who fall victim to senseless gun violence. That's what Jimmy Kimmel said when he was talking about the murder.
Yeah,
What
as he opened it up
on the air, what he said was that there was a movement, the MAGA movement, was trying very hard to make sure that there was no connection between the shooter and MAGA, and they were going through extraordinary efforts because they didn't want to be labeled as having killed Charlie. But at the point that they were doing that, we didn't know anything about the shooter.
Right.
And so he was criticizing what a group was doing. He was not commenting directly on Charlie Kirk's murder. When he commented upon it, I thought it was a completely appropriate sentiment.
So it speaks to the politicization of so much, even a funeral, even the death of an individual, horrific death of an individual like Charlie Kirk and his assassination. We immediately begin to weaponize it, and we use it for our politics. I mean, we get on, and within such a short period of time, we've already determined what motivated the shooter, even before we know. And I think that's problematic in our society. Rabbi, you were going to say something.
Yeah, Alan, we've heard people label others in the most disgraceful fashion. For example, if you refer to the president of the United States as Hitler, and you use that repeatedly, that impacts people's thinking. When you have these derogatory slogans being thrown from both sides, It's not the, only one side. I know people, conveniently say, look, see what your side does? And they don't want to look within. Both sides are guilty of this kind of verbal trespassing. I don't know what the answer is, except you said something before about more free speech is the answer to combat, hateful free speech. I remember talking to a dean of a law school, and I asked her a simple question. When the valedictorian stood up and gave this very, very hateful address about Israel and everything, but hateful, why didn't you come back and say that wasn't the final word that's going to be spoken today? Why didn't you say something for which, she admitted that she should have? So I think some of us spend a lot of time talking about what the other said, but not enough time looking within and thinking, well, what did we do about it? What did we say? Not just the other person. We're going to have to stop right here. I'm getting a strong signal that we got a break, so we'll come back.
Yeah, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of The Rev and the Rabbi.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joe Spatasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we're talking with Alan Abramson, criminal defense attorney, who, by the way, was also in the district attorney's office for years in Brooklyn. So he's been on both sides of the aisle, so to speak.
Yes, I have.
And great criminal defense attorney, always stands up, fights zealously for his clients, as you would want of an attorney. Talking about free speech, Alan, you wanted to mention something about the utilization of free speech by others. Go ahead.
When you spoke about the dean and the valedictorian's speech and how hateful it was, the question, I think your approach to the dean was excellent. Because what should the dean have done? Let's say the dean approved the speech and the valedictorian gets up there and has a different speech. Mm-hmm. And it's hateful. And it's offending everybody. Do you cut off the mic? Do you have the speaker removed? Or what you were suggesting, I think, is probably the best solution. After the speaker finishes, there's a response from a responsible party. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you can't have everybody respond, but a response is the appropriate reaction to horrible speech, to speech that offends.
Remember that was the program, Is This Your Final Answer? And I think we have a responsibility to make sure that a hateful speech is not the final speech. And
that's correct.
Go on record and state, this is not who I am, who we are, and we totally, are offended by what has been said here today. That's what's going to be remembered. But when you say nothing, it's that valedictory address that's remembered.
Yeah. There are asymmetries in power and access when it comes to free speech, because speech freedoms aren't evenly distributed. Some voices are protected or cushioned more than others. And some voices are vulnerable when it comes to, saying certain things. When you're a media owner, political elite, large platform, they can defend themselves better than, someone who doesn't have that kind of power behind them. How do you respond to that? Well, both of you, gentlemen.
Yeah, well, Rev, I remember, didn't you tell me once that someone stood up at Christian Cultural Center and said something that you had to refute?
Yeah.
Right?
Situation where they decided that they disagreed with something and wanted to express it during the service while I was preaching, which made it even a greater offense, interrupting my sermon. And we had to have that person removed. We found out, of course, they had mental health problems. But there are inequities because the stakes are different when, marginalized communities, They can be deplatformed. They can have legal threats levied against them. You take a guy like Jimmy Kimmel, it was the response of the public pressure on Disney that made a difference because it affected the bottom line. So it's free but not equal. Alan?
That's absolutely correct. Some people would say in today's world that people that don't normally have a platform will find a platform on the internet, and that's a way to start giving marginalized groups the power that they need to respond. But it is difficult, and when you have a megaphone, and let me say it this way, if you find yourself a true moderate, you're in the middle. You don't lean left, you don't lean right. You look on both sides. And when they disagree with the left, they call them communists, socialists. When you disagree with the right, you call them Nazis. Those are protected terms. But boy, do they do damage. And, you think back to the McCarthy era. When you called someone a communist, you could end their career.
That's
you
right.
call someone a socialist. I don't even think they're using the terms correctly. But when they're used, they are powerful terms. And Reverend, you're right. We have people that have power and platforms. They have the right to say what they want, but they should. I hope that when you have that platform, you can act responsibly and still make your point crystal clear.
Yeah, having the right and doing that which is right sometimes are apart from one another. You don't have that. You don't use that responsibility to refrain. You don't have to say everything that's on the tip of your tongue, especially when it's going to separate us even further. Legitimate debate. I mean, I think back over the years. Remember the debates on TV? Remember Kennedy, Nixon, a host of others. We go back during the Rev's time. The Douglas debates.
The Lincoln Douglas debate.
Yeah.
Okay.
We value debate. I look at Jewish tradition. Debate is endemic to who we are as a people. We're always debating. We're always disagreeing with one another. The Talmud is filled with disagreement, and yet we try to keep it together. We recognize that there's room for disagreement. There's no room for destruction. You don't destroy someone with whom you disagree. You debate that person. And unfortunately on campuses today, when you see these verbal assaults, these hateful attacks, and translate very often to physical attacks. I'd love you to address what's going on campus, what campuses can do and cannot do.
Yeah, I want to add to that question so that Alan can respond, because we live in a very highly polarized society today. And much of the tension over free speech revolves not around legal permission, but cultural legitimacy. Who is allowed to speak and when? And some speech is delegitimized, gentlemen. You know that by certain social groups or political sectors.
Right.
Yes.
How do we respond to that, Alan?
Well, you have to understand that schools are actually also another quasi-exception to some of the First Amendment rules. Because they're acting in loco parentis, they can put limits on certain things that occur in schools. But let's just talk college campus. There's no question that no matter how much you disagree with the message or how abhorrent the message is, groups can protest on campus. But they have to stay within time, place, and manner restrictions. And it can't go over, speech can't turn into action in the sense of, I want to speak, so I'm going to take over a campus building. That's illegal. That is not protected by First Amendment speech. You can't deny people access to campus because they're a Zionist or they're Jewish or they're Christian or whatever it is. You can't deny them access to campus. But again, you can't protest necessarily all night long with no noise restriction because some people have to sleep on campus. So again, time, place, and manner restrictions are appropriate. You cannot discriminate based on the message, but conduct is not speech.
Yeah, we have just less than a minute left, and I think also what you're saying is it's incumbent upon administrators, certainly presidents of universities, to be very, very aggressive in protecting the rights of students who are under those kinds of attacks. When libraries are taken over, when students hide in classrooms because they fear they're going to get attacked, when mezuzahs are ripped off doorposts, you gotta be out there, be in the front lines, and not sit back, and make some kind of very, very tepid pronouncement.
You do. You have to be strong and recognize that you have to protect the message of the group that's hateful and the people who are the object of the hate. You have to protect both. And maybe it's walking a fine line, but you can't do it weakly. You can't be namby-pamby about it. You have to be aggressive.
Rev, final blessing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's about preserving freedom of speech, and it requires vigilance, clarity of principle, and courage to protect even speech we dislike, so long as it remains within the bounds of truth and justice and love. Let me be very faith-informed here in my closing. But yeah, and it's a challenge. It's a really, really a challenge.
Our producer has ended our free speech on the air, so we've come to the end of the segment.
See, it's regulated. How about that?
This show is a very important element of protecting free speech. Because you bring up topics, you discuss them, but not at the top of your lungs, and you try to educate people.
Yeah, we do the best we can. And thank you for being on the program. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us again for another session with the dynamic duo, the Rev and the Rabbi. Till next time, God bless.
Thanks for listening to The Rev and the Rabbi. You can hear The Rev and the Rabbi Sunday mornings at 7. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?